What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And today we're going to talk about the 5 advantages to being in prison. Now, this is specific to myself, right? I was incarcerated from 96 to 2005. A lot of you guys already know that. And so in the state of California. And so it's from my view, but I think you'll find these things translate across prison systems, states, who you ran with or whatever. And so stick around. With that being said, let's get into the 5 advantages to being in prison, according to myself. Number one, healthy diet. It's not so much really that the food in prison is so healthy. It's that it's not as unhealthy as what a lot of us eat when we're in the streets. And it's also more routine than what a lot of folks eat in the streets. Maybe you're poor, you're homeless, you're young, you're on dope, whatever reason, you're not eating regularly out there. In prison, you're gonna get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? Um, and it's generally less processed food. You get some vegetables, right? You get meat, you get bread. So it is healthier than what a lot of us eat when we're not in prison. And that's an advantage, right? It's good for your body. Um, Another kind of flip side to that, or extension of that, in terms of health, is exercise. So obviously, you don't have to go to prison to exercise, right? Going to prison, you might have to exercise when you go to prison, though. I know I identified with and ran with the group in which exercise was not voluntary. You were going to bust down, you were going to work out whether you liked it or not. And there are obviously other groups that operate the same way. And so you may find yourself really hating the exercise, but your physical safety is in danger if you don't, by your own people. And so you may not exercise in the street. You go to prison, you're going to mind somebody. And if that somebody says exercise, you're going to exercise. But also those who aren't forced to tend to a lot of times just engage in it. It becomes almost like an unofficial community pressure. For one, you're bored, right? If you get the luxury of going outside to a yard like this, um, you can walk the track, you can do push-ups. We still had weights when I was in prison. They took those away fairly early on. There's bar work, there's handball, and a lot of people are doing something. And so other folks coming into prison tend to notice that, man, everybody's kind of doing something. Let me do something, right? Let me get involved. And so it's like positive peer pressure, so to speak. Anyways, again, you don't have to go to prison to eat healthy, and you don't have to go to prison to exercise. But should you go to prison, those are, that is collectively one advantage, to yourself in being there. Number two, relationships, right? Actually, lack of. So, relationships in the streets can be complicated, right? Intimate relationships, relationships with kids, with family, um, they're difficult to maintain, right? Your mom or your grandma sweating you. You got a baby's mama, she's on your case. There's kids. The kids need this. The kids need that. Maybe the kids are in different places with different baby's mamas. Um, there's just drama a lot of times with our relationships. There are not a lot of healthy ones. And so you go to prison, you don't have to stay engaged in those unhealthy ones, right? You don't have to answer letters. You don't have to make phone calls. You don't have to go to the visiting room, right? Or send an approval slip. And so you could really just sort of cut off any relationships in society that you don't want. And personally, I value relationships. I didn't have kids before I went to prison. I have 3 of them now. I'm not with their mom. Um, there's been some drama there. There's been some relationship issues. I was a teenager when I went to prison, and I had done years before I actually went to CDC. So I didn't have a history of positive relationships with anybody. I didn't have a lot of examples of healthy relationships. And so it was a learning curve when I came home. Now that I've done it, now that I have some healthy relationships, now that I've learned something about myself and about other people, I really value those. But again, if you're coming off the streets and you don't have those relationships and you don't care to have them, technically you can just cut them all off when you go to the joint. Um, that generally is not good for your kids. Probably heartbreaking for your family. A lot of our families, especially those where people have been doing time kind of for generations in our family, um, they won't bring drama to you, right? So relatives that you were kind of butting heads with, on the streets when you was running amok, you don't butt heads with so much when you're in prison because they don't want to bother you, right? They don't want to put stress on you because they're afraid you're going to do something that's going to keep you in there longer or get you hurt or distracted from this world you have to live in, whatever they think, right? So so you really get kind of sanitized or glossed over pieces of relationships with people when you're in prison. Again, that does not set you up well for coming home, right? Um, and there'll be, I've talked about that before in videos, and there'll be others about relationships. But if you're gonna go to prison, one advantage is you can cut off the rest of the world if you so choose. And those people who care about you in the world that do get at you are probably gonna be kind of walking on eggshells. Um, so number three, what's the third one? You're gonna learn some manners, right? I know that out here I see people behave in certain ways sometimes, or I find myself in situations where I'm looking around like, is this shit normal? Like, am I the only one that sees this, or what's going on? And and often I'm the only one, right? I feel like I'm the only one who sees some type of behavior or some type of mentality as like, man, what is going on? You feel like the odd one out. Well, in prison, that's much less common. Um, you are going to learn some basic manners. You're going to learn to not interrupt people. You're going to learn to give people their space. You're going to learn to stay out of business that's not yours, right? You're going to learn some things. You don't reach over people's plates. You don't use the bathroom in your cell when somebody's eating. There's courtesy flushes. You clean up after yourself. Hygiene is you know on a premium, right? You keep your cell clean. Like there's just certain things that you do and certain things that you don't do to be a good neighbor and to be a good citizen, so to speak, of the community. The streets don't require any of that of you. People act any old kind of ways. Um, Society kind of changes and norms change so that when you come home from prison, what used to be normal ain't so normal anymore. Um, Now there's new stuff that's normal. You got to kind of figure it out. It doesn't really matter if you like it or not. That's just the way it is. You don't have to deal with that when you're in prison. When you're in prison, things are pretty much the same, and they've been pretty much the same for a long time in terms of what qualifies as basic respect, basic courtesies, basic norms. And again, not every single person goes by them. Some groups are more likely to enforce that than others. But across the board, it's pretty standard. And so you're gonna learn some manners in prison. You're gonna learn to mind people. You're gonna learn some manners, and you're gonna do so in a community of people that sort of believe the same as you. So you never really have to feel like the odd one out, right? Um, Number four, bills. You ain't got no bills in prison. You you can get bills, right? You can do stuff where you owe people money. Strongly discourage that, but you don't have to pay for your existence with money. Now, you might have to pay with labor, right? Or you have to work, or you have to go to school. You have to do these things in order to be able to go out to the yard as often, or to be able to have as much of a canteen drawn and that sort of thing. So it doesn't mean there's no responsibility. There's a lot of responsibility in prison, a huge amount of responsibility, personal responsibility, group responsibility, just a ton. So you notice that is not on here. But bills, you don't have to pay for your food. You don't have to pay for your housing. You don't have to pay for your clothes. You don't have to pay for any of that. And you could survive getting no money from the streets and having no hustle in prison, having no pay number, having nobody looking out for you. You could survive in prison, flat broke, really forever, if it comes down to it. And so, yeah, there you go. No bills. Now, that cost is paid in the streets. That's paid by taxpayers. There's a community cost. There's plenty of cost to going to prison, right? You cost a lot when you go to prison. You cost a lot to your family. You cost a lot to your community. You cost a lot to society. You cost a lot all the way around, right? In many, many different ways beyond money, and often involving money. But again, you don't have bills. So there you go. You don't have freedom, but you also don't have bills. The last one, number 5, and this one is particular for me. All of them are, but this one, kind of has a special place for me, and that is medical care. So while I was incarcerated, I think sometime around like 99, so I was 22ish. I found out that I had a hereditary form of colon cancer and needed a major surgery. Um, Now, when they went to do that surgery, I was in Salinas Valley on a level 4 yard, active, although there wasn't language we used back then, but definitely active yard. I was in a place of responsibility on that yard. They wanted to transfer me to Mill Creek, right, which was a prison in which reputable people, convicts, could not go to Mill Creek, right? That was informants and dropouts and people that did unmentionable things to women and children and whatnot. So for medical care or not, I'm not going over there, right? And actually signed a slip, saying that I wouldn't hold the Department of Corrections liable when I died before my release date because it was inevitable based on my health condition. They want to switch things around. I went to Vacaville. There'll be another video about this, coming up, and I've talked about it a little bit before. But the point is, I went and had a surgery at Vacaville. Most of my colon removed, and it saved my life, right? I would not have probably got that surgery if I was in the streets because I didn't see doctors very often when I was in the streets. I'd had this condition my whole life and I didn't even know it, right? So you get medical care. Now, there's a twist to that. Not only does the prison play games in terms of where you get the medical care to try to impact your reputation or your standing or whatever, right? But also, I've had complications from that surgery ever since. Right? It's been, 20 some odd years. I've had numerous surgeries in the streets. I've faced just a litany of consequences because of how that surgery was performed. So yes, it saved my life. I would not have lived to be paroled in 2005 had I not had this surgery. But the way they did, they gutted me down the stomach, 52 staples, right? Just gutted me, got me open and took all my stuff out. My kids have this same hereditary, two of my kids, my daughters have this same hereditary condition. And one of them just needed surgery to accomplish the same thing that my first surgery at Vacaville accomplished. She is not in prison, right? She is a child. She has medical coverage. She has health care, right? And she has good insurance. It costs, but she has good insurance. So she went there and they did the surgery through a tiny incision in her belly button. And you can't see it, right? And especially as she grows older, you will continue it'll be even less visible, right? But you got to stare inside her belly button to see a little scar. She was back at school in a week. She was running around, she was swimming, she was playing games, she was living a beautiful, healthy, productive, physical life, just like any other child her age. And you would never know that she had this very major procedure done in which the majority of her colon was taken out. Myself, however, no. Like I said, numerous surgeries for different reasons, but the scar tissue, the way that it was done, the brutality of it. Yes, it was life saving. Um, but man, if I'd have had that surgery on the streets, my life would look very different now, and my journey would have been very different health wise. And so you have medical care, right? You got a toothache, they'll pull it, right? There's no fillings, there's no cavities, there's no bridges and whatever else they do with dental care. You don't get that in prison, but they'll pull it. Um, so you get medical care, right? Again, not as good a medical care as you get in the streets, but you get it. So the moral to this is, look, of all the things that come with doing time in prison, those are the only 5 things that I could really think of that could be viewed as an advantage. If you guys know of more, feel free to leave them in the comments, right? And hopefully you like this video, subscribe to it, and subscribe to the channel and whatnot. But those are the only things I could think of that are an advantage to being in prison, right? And obviously, all of those things, right? Healthy diet and exercise, relationship issues, right? Learning some manners, not having, medical care. All of that stuff has a much better flip side on the streets. You can eat better in the streets. You don't have to go to prison for that. You don't have to go to prison, for those things. You don't have to go to prison to exercise. You don't have to go to prison to really learn how to have healthy relationships, because that's the goal. The goal is not to have no relationships. That's not how people are wired. The goal is to have relationships that are healthy and fruitful and of value, right? And so you get those on the streets. You learn how to do that. You can learn how to do that in prison, but it's much easier on the streets, and you practice that in the streets. Manners, respect, a sense of dignity about yourself, man, that is easily available in society. No bills. You're not going to be a place where you have no bills on the streets, but can be in a place to where your bills are not overwhelming based on your income, right? In other words, you can afford to live. And when you can afford to live, you can dictate how you live. Hey, I'm going to live in an apartment. I'm going to live in a house. I'm going to have a car. I'm going to do these things. Yeah, I have to pay for that stuff, right? I'm going to go to work. And when I go to work, they're going to give me this in return. That's normal. That's healthy. You get that in the streets. And then obviously medical care is a struggle for a lot of people in society. Don't get me wrong. And it's something that this country has failed to get right throughout its existence. But yet, even still, you will get better medical care in the streets on Medi-Cal than you're going to get in prison from doctors that oftentimes can't practice in other places outside of prisons because of their records themselves. So anyways, there you have it, man. 5 advantages to being in prison. Personally, I don't find that any one of those, much less all 5 of them together, justifies going to prison or makes going to prison worth it. Help others move to excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it, and help your community because they need you. Check around. There's a ton of content, and I'm going to be dropping new videos consistently now. So keep an eye out, man. Hit the bell for notifications. I'll be here every day. Take care.